Fairy tales are both stories of transformation and symbolic poetry. They are gifts from our ancestors, offering symbols and guidance for our human development. In this show, artist, philosopher, and teacher Sean Kramer will lead us into the imaginal realm of fairy tales, where we will find healing images and wise teachings for our own journey through this enchanted world. So welcome to Under Their Spell, meditating on fairy tales.
Welcome back, everyone, to Under Their Spell, meditating on fairy tales. In today's meditation, we will meditate on the idea of inner conflicts as expressed or externalized in fantasy through fairy tales and children's stories. And we'll take as an example the children's story Cat in the Hat, which, while not strictly a fairy tale, is very fairy tale-like in many ways and is a good example, a simple, clear example to manifest some things that are true of fairy tales and a lot of children's stories. So to begin, let us bring ourselves into a relaxed, meditative state of awareness that will act as a bridge to the inner world of the imagination. So using your breath, allow your in-breath to take your awareness into your body. Noticing the state, the energy, the feelings of your body at this moment. And with your out breaths, allow your body to relax, to release and let go of any tensions that you do not need at this time. And to hand over to the heavenly powers at this time in your life, so that during this hour you can more freely explore the inner world of imagination and symbols. And imagine before you a mirror. See yourself reflected in the mirror. And as you look into the mirror at your reflection, see yourself going back in time, getting younger. You go back, you see yourself as a teen, a youth, and as a child. And as you look in the mirror at yourself as a child, you see a wound. One of the wounds you received, as we all do in our sensitive childhood. Now imagine your guardian angel approaching that image of yourself as a child and reaching out with its angelic hand of light and love energy and touching that wound and healing it. And we ask our guardian angels and all the angels to be with us this hour and always, to shine their light within our minds and hearts, to guide our imaginations so that we may form healthy and transforming images and symbols. And may they guide and direct us to understand the symbols. So far in this series of fairy tale meditations, we have been looking at fairy tales as symbolic images. Fairy tales can be seen as a mixture of both symbolic poetry and stories as stories. If we look at the fairy tale as just one or the other, either as symbolic poetry or just as story, some things don't make sense. We have to see them as having both of these facets. Just as a story, some things might seem implausible. Where did the witch come from in Hansel and Gretel? How did the girl put together her sisters in Fitcher's bird, take their body parts and bring them back to life? The fairy tale doesn't try to explain it because it's not just trying to tell a story with probability, but it's also poetically symbolic, and those elements make sense as poetic symbols. In this meditation today, and in some of the coming ones, I want to bring in and meditate a little more on the story aspect of fairy tales. So in the previous ones, in looking at the symbols, we have given some interpretation of some of the symbols. We will continue to do that and try to go even deeper into some of the symbols and how symbolism works. But today, we will bring in this aspect of story. So first, I would like to spend a little time meditating on story. What is a story? And why are stories so important to humans? And then we will take some of those insights and use them to explore the story of the Cat in the Hat. So, what is a story? When we tell stories, we use words to represent or signify some connected series of events. But that's not really enough to make by itself to make something a story. I might describe my walk through the woods, that I went for a drive and I parked, got out of my car and went on the path. I walked along the path, saw some oak trees, some pine trees, the snow, and I came back to my car and drove home. That wouldn't really be a story, except in a very loose and broad sense. There's something else needed, kind of to make something a story. So what if I said, I got out, I went on the path, I walked through the woods, and I came to a cave. And in that cave was a giant ogre who wanted to kill and eat me. And I maybe tricked the ogre in some way and got away and came back. That would be more of a story. And what is added to make this more a story than just a mere narration of events? The philosopher Aristotle called it a knot. Which the story ties a knot and then unties the knot. And so most stories have two parts. A part where a knot is tied and then a knot is untied. Well, what does he mean by a knot? Well, a knot in a story is a conflict. He's using an image of a rope tied into a knot and then untied as an image for a conflict. A story first ties a knot, that is, it leads you down into some conflict or difficulty, and then it unties the knot or resolves the conflict. The word resolution, like a story resolution, is actually the Latin word. Resolution is the Latin word for untying. So the story ties a knot or creates a problem or conflict and then unties it. So as stories, fairy tales tend to lead a character and imaginatively us into a difficulty or conflict and then lead us out. A story could just tie a knot, leading us into a problem and then just stop or end with no resolution, leaving us in a state of hopeless frustration, as some stories do. But fairy tales as stories are intended not merely to express the problems and fears of human life, the difficulties, which they do very well, but they are meant to go further and symbolize also ways of resolving the difficulties and conflicts of human life. So stories then are not merely narration of events, things that happen, but of events in which there is contained some sort of knot or conflict. So what is a conflict? What do we mean by conflict? A conflict implies two, sometimes more things in opposition. To be in opposition. Well, a conflict means that there are two things meeting both of which cannot exist or be realized together. So, for example, if on my walk in the woods I meet a giant ogre who wants to kill and eat me, and I do not want that, I want to live, to continue my life, then beings are meeting that have opposed desires. Both of the desires cannot be realized together. The ogre's desire to kill and eat me, and my desire to live. Both of those can't be together. One of them will cancel out the other. So there's a conflict or opposition. And so when these things in opposition that can't be realized together meet, something has to happen. Either I get killed by the ogre, or I get away and the ogre is frustrated in his desire to kill and eat me. So when things in opposition meet, there is a tension. Something must happen or change in order to resolve or untie this tension or conflict. This then is a way of meditating on stories or fairy tales, which we can use to meditate on what are the things in conflict in the fairy tale or the story. And then how is that conflict resolved? Or to use Aristotel's image, what is the knot in the tale and how is it tied and untied or resolved? So our story for today, The Cat in the Hat, is, I think, an instructive illustration of these ideas of conflict in stories. And particularly, it is a clear example of something that fairy tales do, but maybe isn't obvious at first, which is they take an inner conflict and externalize or express it imaginatively. So let's meditate a little before we jump into Cat in the Hat on this idea of an inner conflict. What do we mean by an inner conflict as opposed to an outer conflict? A struggle, for example, between a man and a bear in the woods would be an outer conflict, a conflict occurring in the outer world. The bear might be struggling to kill and eat the man, and the man is struggling for his life. But as humans, we also undergo inner conflicts, conflicts that occur inside of us, not just in the outer world, but inside of us, which is a very interesting thing. This means that there are things inside of us, our own selves, which we feel as a kind of unity, but things that are in opposition. Things in us that can't both exist or be realized together, which then creates an inner tension, so that one or both of the things in opposition must change. So I might have, for example, two desires inside of me which are in opposition, which cannot both be realized. I might desire to get up an hour early before work and do yoga and meditate. But I might also at the same time desire to sleep another hour. Or I might desire to spend my evening studying, learning something or studying something for school. And at the same time, I might desire to spend the evening, say, watching movies on Netflix. So I will be in an inner conflict. I will have one desire opposing another. If I sleep the extra hour, I will miss the time for yoga and meditation. If I get up and do the yoga, I will not get that extra hour of sleep. Both desires can't be realized together. A married person might desire to be faithful to their partner and might be in a situation where they are attracted by another person. And they can't do both. They can't remain faithful and become sexually involved with another person. One of those desires will be realized and the other will not. And this is an especially human thing, this idea of inner conflicts. It's not seen so much in animals. When I was working on a ranch in Colorado, I was working with the cows, and if I wanted them to follow me, I took a bucket of these pellets that they love to eat and would just shake it and they would come running. If they were hungry and the food was in front of them, they would eat it. I had to be careful, because if they got too close, they would just knock me down and trample me and to eat the food. I never saw the cows deliberating about whether they needed to diet or whether they were eating too much. If they were hungry and the food was there, they ate it until they weren't hungry anymore, or until there was a fence between them and the food. Whereas humans have a lot of inner conflicts around food. What kind of food to eat, when to eat, whether they need to diet. I'm not aware of animals fasting. Sometimes animals are sick and their body makes them not hungry and they don't eat. But being healthy and hungry and deciding not to eat when you have food available, that seems to be an especially human thing. And that shows us something special about humans. So inner conflicts are uniquely or especially human, and we might wonder why that is. And we will come back to that, and maybe this story will help us. But there are many kinds of inner conflicts, and there's one that this story Cat in the Hat is about. Sometimes it's described as a conflict between our inner child and our inner parent. As children grow up, they have their spontaneous desires and fears and inclinations, kind of instincts. But they also experience their parents who sometimes tell them and guide or command them to do things that go against their inclinations. And as we grow up, we internalize the voice and the morals, you might say, of the parents, and that becomes an inner voice within us. So we can have these inner conversations even as we're older. So maybe we're a college student and there's a voice in us that might be a continuation of our parent, that you should do your homework, you should be spending this time on your homework. And another voice that's telling us why we should do something else that we might be more inclined to play a game or go out with friends. So there develops within us as we grow that inner child voice and the inner parent voice. Let us enter our story and see how it exemplifies some of these ideas about conflicts and stories and inner human conflicts. And I think that's a lot of the attraction of this story, along with the poetry and imagery, is how well and clearly it imagines for children their inner world. So the story begins, there's a picture of two children sitting by a window on a rainy day. And it says, "The sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, so we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. I sat there with Sally, we sat there, we two. And I said, how I wish we had something to do. Too wet to go out, too cold to play ball, so we sat in the house and did nothing at all. So all we could do was to sit, 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 and we did not like it, not one little bit." And now the story starts to build up the inner conflict to tie the knot. And we could see this story, as we can other fairy tales too, as having two parts, in which the knot or conflict problem is developed, tied, and then a second part in which it is resolved or untied. And in the first part of the story of the Cat in the Hat, the story of the part of tying the knot, there first comes in the cat, and things start to get wild and problematic, and then they get worse. He brings in a box with these two things in it. So let's look at the knot, the conflict part of the story, and then we'll see how Dr. Seuss describes the resolution or untying of the conflict. So as they're sitting there, bored at home, with their mother away, they're alone, something went bump. How that bump made us jump. We looked and then we saw him step on the mat. We looked and we saw him, the cat in the hat, and he said to us, why do you sit there like that? I know it is wet and the sun is not sunny, but we can have lots of good fun that is funny. So this strange creature, this wild cat with a hat, comes in, and his interest is fun. Let's have fun. I know some good games we could play, said the cat. I know some new tricks, said the cat in the hat. A lot of good tricks. I will show them to you. Your mother will not mind at all if I do. Then Sally and I did not know what to say. Our mother was out of the house for the day. So for this first part of the story, that will be common. The children are silent. They don't know what to say, and the talking and action goes on with the cat and this other creature, the fish. But our fish said, "No, no, make that cat go away. Tell that cat in the hat you do not want to play. He should not be here. He should not be about. He should not be here when your mother is out." Now, have no fear, said the cat. My tricks are not bad, said the cat in the hat. Why, we can have lots of good fun if you wish with a game that I call Up, Up, Up with a Fish. So the cat starts to juggle the fish in the bowl, and he keeps adding other things and getting more wild and crazy with his juggling, picking up books and toys. Then he jumps on top of a ball while he's juggling. And the cat is having lots of fun. The fish is quite distressed and terrified. Finally, the cat falls down. The cat falls on his head. He comes down with a bump from there up on the ball. And Sally and I, we saw all the things fall. And our fish came down too. He fell into a pot, and he said, "Do I like this game?" said our fish as he lit. "No, I do not like it, not one little bit." "Now look what you did," said the fish to the cat. "Now look at this house. Look at this, look at that. You sank our toy ship, sank it deep in the cake. You shook up our house and you bent our new rake. You should not be here when our mother is not. You get out of this house," said the fish in the pot. So what is happening here? There's a clear conflict between the fish and the cat. And if we use the image of the inner parent and the inner child, it's very clear, and Dr. Seuss is describing with very fitting symbolism the voices within the child, the inner child and the inner parent. The cat is the inner child, the inclination to play, to have fun. And the fish is externalizing the voice in their head that they have begun to internalize of their mother. What would our mother think? So the fish is expressing their imagination, the inner voice of their mother. They should not be making a mess, going wild, juggling. And why use the cat and the fish? Well, the cat, there are a number of reasons. For one, the cat is a warm-blooded animal and the fish is cold-blooded. So the cat is this inclination to play. Cats are wild, roaming. They also have cultural associations with have repressed powers, darkness, witches, magic, things repressed by society. The fish is also with roaming movement of the cat. He is smaller and more dependent. He needs the children to help him and listen to him, so that in the child, the voice of the parent is being internalized, but they have their own immediate impulses, instincts, and inclinations. So the fish, with its confined, kind of more ordered, bounded, predictable existence, is the image of the directions of the parent. In some ways, we might say reason, versus the warm-blooded, impulsive, exploratory inner child impulse, emotion. But now things even get more troublesome. The cat says he wants to introduce them to another game, and he brings in a box. Then the cat ran out, and then fast as a fox, the cat in the hat came back in with a box, a big red wood box. It was shut with a hook. Now look at this trick, said the cat. Take a look. Something that is shut up in a box, but now is going to be released. And he got up on top with the tip of his hat. I call this game fun in a box, said the cat. In this box are two things, and I will show to you now. You will like these two things, said the cat with a bow. I will pick up the hook. You will see something new. Two things, and I call them thing one and thing two. These things will not bite you. They want to have fun. Then out of the box came thing two and thing one. And they ran to us fast. They said, how do you do? Would you like to shake hands with thing one and thing two? And Sally and I did not know what to do. So we had to shake hands with thing one and thing two. We shook their two hands, but our fish said, no, no, those things should not be in this house. Make them go. They should not be here when your mother is not. Put them out, said the fish in the pot. So this conflict within the children of wanting to be playful and get more carried away and wild and messy in their play, that inclination, and then the other inner voice of their mother, what their mother would say, what they should be doing and should not be doing. So this story is taking this very basic experience of inner conflict that all humans have in their early years between some of their spontaneous inclinations and their parents' rules and guidance and command that sometimes conflict within them, and the story is taking it and projecting it out. So we could see this as a description of children playing and going through this inner conflict. And the story is taking these parts of the children and of ourselves that are inside of us and imagining them as if they are characters outside, as if there's a cat and a fish in conflict with one another, which makes our inner experience more sensible, more understandable and imaginable for us. Now these things, 1 and 2, who don't even have names, who are released from the box, are a further expression aspects of the inner child. They're like the children if they completely gave in to that side of themselves. And in the picture in the book, they are drawn like two little children in pajamas with this wild, crazy hair, like two uncared for children, like street children whose hair has grown wild, and they have nothing but pajamas to run around in. Another way of looking at this, what's happening here in this story, is to use some words that are attributed but incorrectly to Sigmund Freud, the distinction between the id, ego, and superego. Sigmund Freud didn't use those words. Those are Latin words, which the American translators put in, apparently to make Freud sound more scientific. But Freud himself said clearly that it's better he thought in psychology to use ordinary language, not use technical or foreign words, such as Latin words as they did. And he used ordinary, he was writing in German, but he used ordinary words instead of what they put as id, ego, and superego. He used the words it, which is what id means in Latin. It, ego, he used the German for I or me. And for superego, he said upper me. So he used the terms it, me, and upper me, or we might say sometimes in English, my higher self. And he said that he wasn't making this up. There's, as if sometimes it sounds like, well, is there some like technical part of my psyche or my brain that's called a superego? And he said he was just pointing out something we all do already, the way we talk about ourselves as having different parts. So some things we talk about that are actually ourselves, but we talk about it as if it's an it, like it made me do it. My anger or my lust made me do this, or my inner demon. Actually, ourselves, aspects of ourselves, but we talk about them as if there's an it that is doing things to us or driving us. And then we refer to other parts of ourselves as our upper self, the upper me, or my higher self, my ideals, my ideal for myself and my better life, and then these other parts, that inclinations that go against that. So he observed that inner conflict in us in a general way and said, we all already talk about ourselves that way, as if there's an it or a whole group of things that we refer to as it, and there's kind of me in the middle, and then there's my upper me or higher self. And we could compare that to these children in this story. There's them in the middle, and there's the cat and these things that just want to play and have fun with no thought of consequences. And then there's the fish as this upper me, this higher self or superego. And the things one and thing two, they get kites and they start to fly kites inside the house. And the illustration shows them running through the house with kites knocking things off the wall, pictures knocking down vases of flowers. And the fish says, as these things run through the house with kites, "No, not in the house," said the fish in the pot. "They should not fly kites in a house, they should not. Or the things they will bump, the things they will hit, oh, I do not like it, not one little bit." Then Sally and I saw them run down the hall. We saw those two things bump their kites on the wall. Thing two and thing one, they ran up, they ran down. On the string of one kite, we saw our mother's new gown, her gown with the dots that are pink, white, and red. Then we saw one kite bump on the head of her bed. So as they're running through the house with their kites, it gets to a breaking point. And here is where the story shifts from tying the knot to untying the knot. And we start to see the resolution, how Dr. Seuss describes the resolution of this conflict, the inner conflict within the children, externalized between the cat and the things on the one hand and the fish on the other. And the boy says those things ran about with big bumps, jumps, and kicks, and with hops and big thumps and all kinds of bad tricks. And I said, this is the first time he speaks in the story, and I said, I do not like the way that they play. If mother could see this, oh, what would she say? The story now takes the turning point with the boy voicing for himself. Before he said, I did not know what to say. My sister and I didn't know what to say. We didn't know what to do. And they're just observing this interplay going on. Now he speaks up for himself. We saw that in the Goose Girl, that if you remember, the Goose Girl was in this problem until she could tell her story in the stove. She finally spoke for herself. And what leads him to finally speak up? That it's gone too far. He himself does not want this wild play to go on. It's when the things bring out on their kite their mother's dress, one kite, and the other one hits the kite on the head of her bed. There the boy says, I do not like this anymore. And that's interesting. they're playing, they're exploring, and it starts to get in an area where that makes them uncomfortable. This is going too far. Symbolized by the mother's dress and her bed. So they're little children, and in their exploration, they're starting to meet these adult things of gender and sexuality. And they feel in themselves that this is going too far. And that's true. Sexuality is something for it's can be very harmful and destructive for literal or psychological children. So the boy now speaks for himself and says, I do not like this, and what would mother say? And he runs and catches the things in a net and asks them to leave. And the fish says, that is good. The cat has gone away, yes, but your mother will come. She will find this big mess. There's still a mess in the house. And this mess is so big and so deep and so tall, we cannot pick it up. There is no way at all. But then, who was back in the house? Why, the cat. Have no fear of this mess, said the cat in the hat. I always pick up all my playthings, and so I will show you another good trick that I know. And the cat drives in with this crazy machine with all these arms and picks up everything in the house and leaves. So there he's describing a kind of resolution of the conflict, that the children have internalized a message of their parents about going too far in their play. They see for themselves, it's not just a voice in their head, what would mother think, but finally they get some insight into it for themselves. It makes sense to them why their mother has these boundaries, and they speak it for themselves. And then the cat, the playful side, the side that can do things, not just the confined fish in the bowl, the cat is something that has energy and does things. They use that part of themselves to pick up to their playthings. So there's a certain harmonizing of this conflict. They have internalized and accepted with their own insight something that their mother has told them from outside, and they've used their energy to pick up, to clean up. She said to us too, did you have any fun? Tell me, what did you do? And Sally and I did not know what to say. Should we tell her the things that went on there that day? Should we tell her about it? Now what should we do? Well, what would you do if your mother asked you? And there, Dr. Seuss ends the story with that question. There's still some of that conflict left. What should you do, and what do you want to do? So that conflict there can be seen as that inner parent, inner child conflict. It could also be seen as a conflict between our reason and our emotions. But are those the same thing? Is that the same conflict? What is the conflict between the inner parent and inner child? Is it the conflict between reason and emotions? Well, they're not really the same thing. I had a friend who, when she would be tired and depressed, she had an inner voice that was hypercritical and very blaming and dismissive of her in her head. And as I got to know her and she told more about her life and her growing up and her family, it became clear that that voice was the voice of her father. Her father wanted a boy and did not get a boy, got a girl, and never was satisfied with that, and let it be known by his over criticism, his dissatisfaction that she never could be enough, what he wanted her to be. And she internalized that voice of her father, and it became an inner voice, an inner critic. So you could say that's the inner parent. But it wasn't quite rational. Right? So as children grow up, they have their senses and emotions, but their reason is not developed yet. So they have to use their parents in place of their reason until their own reason develops. So there's a connection between the inner parent and one's reason, because the inner parent takes the place of reason until our own reason develops. But that voice of our parents, it depends on how really wise and reasonable they were. It can be, if they weren't reasonable, then it's problematic, and as our reason develops, we need to question that and criticize it. So to finish, let me take a few examples from fairy tales. If we look at them in this light as being stories that are imaginatively externalizing inner conflicts, just as this story of Cat in the Hat can be read as a story of the inner conflict of children projected outward into these imaginative fantasy characters of a cat and a fish. So in the first fairy tale we looked at, The Goose Girl, it told a story of a girl, there's a princess who went on a journey with her maid to the castle to go get married to a prince, and on the way the maid takes the identity of the princess and forces her to change clothes, and she takes her horse and she shows up at the castle with the false identity as the princess. And the prince takes in the maid into the castle, and the real princess is sent out into the fields to tend the geese. And if we look at this as an externalized inner conflict, what would the inner conflict be? Well, it would be the inner conflict that a person can have in relationship between their desire to be loved for their true self, so to be known, to be seen deeply and loved as they are, on the one hand, and their fear that if they show themselves deeply and fully, the other person might not really love them. Something will be displeasing and will end the love. So in that conflict, someone might create a false self in order to get love, but that love is in conflict with their desire to be known as they truly are. So the two sides of that conflict are externalized in these two characters, the princess and the maid. In another fairy tale we looked at before, Fitcher's Bird, a girl is taken to an enchanted, beautiful mansion made by a wizard, and if she does not open one of the doors in the house in which there's something horrible, there's these dismembered, bloody bodies, if she doesn't look in there, she can stay there and be happy. So what inner conflict could that be externalizing? Well, the conflict between the desire to have inner peace by dissociating or avoiding some part of ourselves that is hurt, traumatized, some unpleasant emotion or memory on the one hand, and our desire to grow on the other. So we can create a certain peace in ourselves by avoiding something about ourselves or life, but that can stop our growth, symbolized in the story by the egg that the wizard gives to the girl to keep as long as she doesn't look in the room. She's kept herself undeveloped. But when she looks in the room, she starts to grow and have feathers, and she escapes and burns down the house that she doesn't need. So she's grown by overcoming that dissociation. So that fairy tale gives an external picture of an inner conflict that someone can have between wanting to have peace by avoidance or wanting to grow by facing something. Telling then stories and listening to stories is a properly human activity. Conflicts are particularly human. To be human is to be in conflict and to have inner conflict. When a sensing, instinctual animal develops a higher awareness, an ability to see causes and consequences, then there arise inner conflicts between our more limited instincts and sense desires and our broader awareness of consequences of our behaviors, of seeing more broadly than the immediate present in our immediate search for pleasure. Something might strike our senses and emotions as pleasurable, eating all this dessert, but there's another part of ourselves that humans had developed, this awareness, vaster awareness of things, extensions of time and causality, and we see the effects maybe that eating this will have in the future. And so we have an inner conflict, and that is part of being a human, being an animal, sensing animal who has developed a higher awareness at the same time. And this inner world of being a human is difficult to understand and to grasp, and so we imagine it. We give these inner parts of ourselves that are in conflict symbolic reality in our fantasy and make images of them, of their conflict and of ways to resolve them. We do this very naturally. spontaneously in our dreams. Throughout the day, we're doing this in our fantasy and our inner conversations. But fairy tales and good stories help children and all of us to do this better, do this very human thing of imagining and working through these inner conflicts. So we can be very grateful and make use of these great stories and fairy tales to help us in that. So that is our meditation on the Cat in the Hat. I don't know if Salomon, there's any comments or questions?
Yes. Somebody had asked, what is the purpose of the hat, and what would the cat be without the hat?
I think, to me, it's to show that it's a fantasy. It helps see the cat as symbolic, and also the playfulness and strangeness of the cat. There's also in this story, to me, I enjoy this story, and at the same time I feel there's something like a little creepy about it, and it has but people can see what they think about it, but there is this idea of these children alone at home, and this strange figure with his hat comes in, and I suspect perhaps that Dr. Seuss, the kind of Freudian things I touched upon, that there's more in that area, and that might have to do with the hat too.
Cool. Well, I really enjoyed this story very much.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think it does, when you look at it in that way, as giving an imaginative expression for children of what is happening inside of them. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And anything else, or shall we finish with the meditation?
I believe we are ready to meditate.
Okay. So come with your awareness back into your body, our bodies that carry so much information, guidance, wisdom in the very molecules, structure, nature, inner powers and growth of our bodies. And notice any tension you might have, and just invite that to relax, to release. And open your spiritual part, your higher spirit and mind up to the world world of the good, guiding, holy angels. Through our body, we connect to the earth, and through our spirits, we open up to the spiritual world. As we breathe in, bring those two together, the energy of the earth coming up through our feet, and the spiritual energy of the angels and the divine coming through our minds, our heads, and uniting heaven and earth within our hearts.